Help, I have fallen down a rabbit hole and I can't get out. Friends, I was this month years old, or today years old, as some people would say, when I discovered that James MacArthur was not in the full run of Hawaii Five-O. I've watched a few episodes now and then. I wouldn't consider myself an expert, obviously, and I've never deep dived into the show too deep, but I was watching a YouTube video in the last couple of weeks, and I learned that William Smith was in the final season of Hawaii Five-O. 2025, as I've mentioned before, was the year of William Smith in my household. I spent the year binge watching every example of the weird, wacky, and interesting cult films that I could find lining his filmography. And this all started with a watch through of Laredo around Christmas 2024 into 2025. And I'm still discovering the layers that William Smith had in that very notable persona of his. So it should probably come as no surprise to mention that I've been spending this week hopping, skipping, and jumping through season 12 of Hawaii Five-O, where William Smith joins the cast playing Detective James Kimo Carew. And yes, my uneducated guess, the name was probably crafted so Jack Lord could say Bookham Kimo instead of Bookham Dano. Smith is billed in some form in 19 episodes of that final season. And I've watched, I'd say, at least half of those at this point. It's really dominated most of my week's viewing. And if I am being honest, which I try to be here on Piercing Pop Culture, the pairing of William Smith and Jack Lord, chef's kiss. Chef's kiss for distinctive delivery and screen presence and persona. Smith doesn't have nearly enough to do, but there are some moments where he definitely is allowed to be the William Smith that we know so well and that we enjoy. William Smith is the epitome of those actors that aren't really given enough due, aren't really given enough justice. He is an actor with the most complex, convoluted screen persona that I've ever seen. And frankly, going into 2025, I will honestly admit, I disrespected him a heck of a lot, and I did not give him nearly the amount of appreciation that he was due. Next to Roger Corman, Smith is probably single-handedly responsible for my ever-growing love of cult films and exploitation films. I haven't even gotten the chance to talk about Hell Comes to Frogtown on this podcast. The joy that is Hell Comes to Frogtown, a movie that I would have never anticipated would have given me as much joy as it did. Invasion of the Bee Girls, another one where if you haven't looked it up, please do. I think it's available on Midnight Pulp right now. Phantom Empire, The Losers, Chrome and Hot Leather, the delightfully titled Chrome and Hot Leather, which partners him up again with Peter Brown. So anybody who's deep down the Laredo rabbit hole might appreciate that one. And we haven't even gotten into Piranha, which I might have reviewed. I know I reviewed that over on TikTok, and I really should make time to talk about that as well. The deceptively titled Piranha came a few years before the Joe Dante film that everyone remembers, and Smith's film called Piranha isn't really about piranhas, if you get my drift. After initially coming up in westerns, and we've talked about him in the Virginian Vault, he pops up in the series a few times before eventually joining the cast of Laredo in 1965. After the Western wave, you see him pivot to an intense level of exploitation films. Biker films and I have always had a challenging relationship, but Chrome and Hot Leather was one that I was given tremendous amount of joy from that film. I can't remember where I watched it. I need to look that one up. But very grimy, very low budget, very dusty, dirty, late 1960s, early 1970s biker film starring Smith wearing a tank top the entire time as he cruises around on his Harley. I shouldn't say that, is motorcycle. I cannot say I'm at all an expert in anything motorcycles, especially since most of my motorcycle vocabulary comes from Eric Von Zipper in the Beach Party films. But I digress. And then he settles in this genre really throughout the 1970s and into the 1980s. And these are cult films. These are low budget exploitation films. These are those movies that you find playing really late on television or on the discount rack. So many of these were movies I never heard of, but they made me smile. They kept me entertained. I found joy. And like I've always been saying in this podcast, harness the things that find you joy. And in so many of these roles, William Smith was a trooper. He truly was, and I adore so many of these choices that he was making throughout. This isn't even getting to Memorial Valley Massacre from 1988, a film about a group of campers who were terrorized by a being that I can only call a caveman in a Los Angeles campground during the Memorial Day weekend. Smith has a very small but very colorful part that he plays throughout, and honestly, I remember his parts probably more than most of it. He is a performer who, at the time of his passing, was defined by these roles. He was a big, bruising brawler. He played bikers, he played generals, he played cowboys. He was easily comfortable in action films. He carried so much weight within his career. And just tiptoeing through the obituaries in the wake of his passing in 2021, that was how everyone knows him. And that's how everyone recognizes him, especially those of a certain age. He was that villain who could dominate against somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger or, Clint Eastwood. He cut such a formidable figure in the action movie genre that it completely defined how we saw him. As I jumped into the newspaper primary source rabbit hole that inevitably followed after I watched Laredo, I was stunned as I learned more about William Smith, the man, which, of course, an actor does not portray themselves on television. A role is not going to be who they are. But reading these articles about this man who wrote poetry and during his military service, learned about his proficiency in languages and was actually fluent in multiple languages, it felt like an entire layer to this man that never was allowed to be seen, that never came out, that was never shown. And it is such a far cry from this bruising, brawling star persona that he had throughout the 1960s and 1970s. It just blew my mind, and I really found myself wanting to learn more and diving into his work because there's such depth to this man in these roles that were decidedly quirky. I wish there was a book here. I wish there was more out there. And I've taken it really as one of the things I've wanted to do with this podcast and the things I've done. Just talk more about this interest in Smith that I've had and why, because he's really a fascinating fellow. And there's more that can be said, and I really want to see more out there than just these shallow obituaries that, talk about the villainous, bruising persona. Which, yes, but there's more complexity here. There's more fascination here, and son of a gun, consider this the beginning. I want to do something longer, something more scripted, more organized, but as I've been watching Hawaii Five-0 this week, I did want to talk a little bit about it and why I've fallen down the William Smith rabbit hole and why I hope that continues. He was my most viewed actor in 2025 on Letterboxd, and I really hope to finish off some of the watches that are still eluding me this year in 2026. I will go ahead and bring this one to a close. Thank you so much for joining me here at Piercing Pop Culture as I took you down my continuing William Smith rabbit hole. Here's to finding out more and watching so many more of these quirky, weird, and often punchy, villainous roles that he played so much during the 1960s through the 1980s. Have a good one, everyone, and come back on Tuesday for our next episode of Piercing Pop Culture. Have a good one, all. Bye, guys.